Welcome to this presentation on the process analysis or how-to essay. To get started, here's just a definition of what a how-to or a process analysis is. It's a matter of arranging a series of events in order and then relating them to one another. And what that simply means is you're going to tell us how to do something. So those series of events are your steps, and then relating them to one another is just telling us how is it that they fit? What happens first, what happens second, etc., etc. So there's a couple of different strategies that you'll use within the writing of this paper. One of them might be narration, because that tells us what happens. Cause and effect tells us why it happens, and so in some of your steps, it will be key to our understanding that you tell us why we're doing a specific step. And then the process analysis is going to tell us how it happens. And so all three of these really show up in this particular paper. So we need to know what happens, why it happens, and then how it's going to happen. Here's a quick intro to your assignment. You need to think of something interesting that you consider yourself to be an expert at. And we'll go over a couple of different types in a second, but ideally this aspect of your life can be a how-to have a successful camping trip, how to water ski successfully, how to cook something. So there's all kinds of those type of topics, but you could also be more creative. I've had people write papers on how to survive the zombie apocalypse. I've had people write papers about how to procrastinate, how to text without getting caught. So all of those kind of topics are how-to, as long as they're showing us how to do something, and it can be as creative, how to be a good hockey player, how to be a good hockey fan, creative as you want. You are going to introduce this topic, activity, or hobby to a beginner or a novice audience, which means you have to be really careful with the language that you use. You can't assume that your audience is an expert like you are. You have to assume that they're a beginner. So this plays into both your topic choice, and once you choose that topic, how you actually write your paper. The third bullet is asking you to write creatively rather than having your paper sound like a recipe or an assembly kit. The problem with the how-to essay is that sometimes it can get very lockstep. First I do this, then I do this, third I do this, and so not very creative. What I'm going to push you to is to try to write creatively. Include some of your own stories. Pick a creative topic is going to certainly be a step in the right direction, but include examples, include things that you have done. That will help it to be more creative. And we've done a lot of different strategies so far. You know how to write stories, you know how to include dialogue, you know how to include description, and so those are things that should really show up in this essay. Fourth bullet talks about using first or third person, not the second person you. So you're going to want to get rid of all of your you pronouns in this essay. Does make it a little bit more difficult. What that means is you're going to have to tell this story essentially as if you're the one performing the task. Or if you'd prefer, you could do it almost as if you were observing someone else do this particular your task. If you're talking about how to catch the big fish, he needs to go to a place like the Mississippi River, or I need to go to a place like the Mississippi River, not you need to go to a place like the Mississippi River. So that's the difference. And then the last bullet is to provide concrete details and examples. So provide things that people can really relate to, provide a lot of them. Give examples, as I mentioned before, of things that you have done that have worked out particularly well for you. One big part of this essay is the thesis statement, and what you're going to want to include in your thesis statement is the end product, what you will be explaining, and its purpose. So tell us why we need to care about what this end product is. How can I use this particular topic in my own life? As I was mentioning before, there's actually two types of process analysis essays. The first is directive, and those are the ones that we're probably most familiar with. Those things like recipes or how to sail a boat, how to make something. That's when there's steps in a process. So first step, second step, third step. The informative essay is a little different because it's looking at stages. And so You know, some of those examples, how to be a procrastinator, it's not step 1, step 2, step 3, but probably a series of stages by which someone moves through in order to become a master procrastinator. And the second bullet underneath of the informative is that you could talk about how something works. When you're looking at writing a how-to, once you've got your topic, you need to make sure of a couple of things. And number one, you need to make sure that you understand the process yourself. If you've only done it a couple of times, probably not a great how-to topic. One thing that I do encourage you all to do is to try out whatever it is that you're going to try to explain. So if it's how to sail a boat, weather may not be great, but if you can go out and sail a boat, it's going to be that much more clear to your audience because you'll be doing it real time essentially and not forgetting any steps. You want to make sure that you note any steps or variations in the process. So if there are things that might be different, you know, if I'm making a recipe or if I'm decorating a cake, if I'm frosting a cake, I can use the Betty Crocker frosting from the can that I get at the grocery store. I can make my own. I can get into fondant or fondant. I can get into, you know, using different types of tools. All of those things are variations than just spreading it on with a knife. And so think about the different ways in which things can be done. Maybe ways that you have tried, but you've come up with this one because it's the best. And so talk about those variations. Talk about maybe what was good or bad about those variations, and then your readers will have a better idea as to the different ways that something can be completed. One other really important aspect of a how-to essay is the order, making sure that it's logical. Most of these will have time markers, first, next, 20 minutes from now, in 3 days. And so making those clear will really help your reader. The second idea is to make sure that you classify all aspects of the process and discuss each one separately if this works for your topic. So for example, if you were talking about how to play the violin. In order to play the violin, I have to have my fingers in a specific place. I need to have the bow and be aware of where that is. I also need to be aware of the placement of the violin, how to hold it. And so sometimes instead of doing first, second, third, because when you're playing the violin, there's 3 things going on at the same time. You have to hold it, hold the strings, and use the bow in a very specific way. That's really confusing. And so what might be easiest is to classify each one of those things separately. So talk about the bow first, and then talk about finger placement, and then talk about how to hold the violin. And then at the end, put it all together. So give us kind of an overview of all 3 of those parts and then put it together. So for some of you, steps will be best. For others, this classification system will be best. Again, we're talking about audience because it is key. You need to make sure that your audience is going to understand what it is that you're writing about. Me being your audience, your classmates being your audience. And so you need to ask yourself some questions. How much does my audience already know? And I've told you a little bit already, they don't know much. We're assuming that they're a novice audience, that they have very little to no knowledge of your topic. You're going to have to look at basic terms. What are basic terms for the topic that you're using? Am I going to have to define them? For some of your topics, you won't have to define basic terms, but for others you will. If my topic, for example, was milking a cow, there's probably some very basic things that some people will not have knowledge of, and so I'll have to define those in order for that to make sense. Look for places where you can simplify the process. So again, if there's a lot of really intricate steps, maybe there's a piece or 2 that could be left out, maybe it can be simplified. Those are things that you'll want to think about in terms of your audience. And then you also need to think about where will you start? So how far back in the process do I need to go? If I'm talking about how to milk a cow, am I going to start just when the cows are in the barn, or do I have to talk about how they get to the barn? Because sometimes that's a process. And so where is it that you will start your paper? Going along with audience, these are some things that you may want to keep in mind. If you have very specialized or technical language, you're going to have to define it. So be aware of that. And it may even help to list those things so that you know what it is that you have to define for your audience. If there's specialized equipment, tell us what that is, tell us what it does. If there's techniques, make sure that you really go into detail about that, or as much detail as necessary to be able to perform that task. And then the third step is just kind of an interesting way to simplify things, and it's to use a comparison or an analogy. And that might be a simile, it might be a metaphor. You might say, this step is like something else that we're familiar with. And so giving us those comparisons or those analogies can really help the paper to come to life for your reader. Now, when you will be graded, these are the things that will be on your rubric. Number 1, did you write to provide directions, and were you creative in doing that? Number 2, did it appear that you knew the subject well enough to explain it clearly and accurately? And did you, in fact, describe it clearly and accurately? Number 3, did you include a thesis statement that stated what the process or the topic was and why you needed to know it? Number 4, did you write clear paragraphs that included transitions? Transitions are going to be important. You're going to want to make sure that you lead us in and out of paragraphs in a way that makes sense. So show us the connection between paragraphs as well as within paragraphs. And then the 5th thing that's on there, have you paid attention to the pronoun you, and have you not used it? So you want to be careful of those things. These are the things that are specific to this paper. As always, you'll be graded on intro, conclusion, grammar, some of those type of things, and you can check out the rubric that will be attached. And one thing that I would highly suggest that you do before you turn in your drafts, I would make sure that you had someone unfamiliar with your topic read it. And maybe even have someone familiar with your topic read it also, and ask them, did I go into too much detail in certain places? If you have a novice person read your paper, someone who doesn't know much about your topic, they'll probably give you a pretty good indication if it's confusing, if it's as clear as it could be, and what maybe needs to be explained better. And then again, the last one kind of gets to audience again. You can't assume your readers are going to know what you're talking about. We do that a lot. We make assumptions about our audience and that, oh, they'll get this, they'll understand this. And in fact, more detail would have been necessary. So definitely check out your audience. Make sure you know who they are. Make sure that you know your topic and what your audience will know about your topic. I wish you the best of luck on this how-to essay. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email or to ask.